There's a 5-star combo guard in the 2025 recruiting class that just may end up being a must-get for Mark Pope and Kentucky basketball.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing the latest surrounding 5-star combo guard Darryn Peterson. What do we know about the latest in his recruitment? How does he fit in Lexington? Going to go ahead and tell you he may end up being a must-get for Mark Pope and company because of just how good he is. Also on today's episode, speaking of players that could fit the system, a 7-foot, 4-star center that likes to shoot and make three-pointers could be an excellent get for Mark Pope and company. They just offered him. We'll talk about him as well. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more, and as playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. You can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. 5-star combo guard Darryn Peterson could end up being a massive get for Mark Pope and Kentucky basketball. In case you don't know who Peterson is, 5-star combo guard in the 2025 class, 6'5", 195 out of Huntington Prep in West Virginia. He is the number 3 player in next year's class, the number 1 combo guard, and the number 1 player in the state of West Virginia. Obviously, a number of big-time schools in pursuit of Darryn Peterson. On3's Joe Tipton reported Peterson is planning on taking visits to Kentucky, Louisville, Southern California, and Washington during August and September, and he just recently had a little bit of his father, had a little bit of a conversation with a Kentucky beat writer about what's going on with Darryn's recruitment right now. So we'll break down in detail kind of what we see out of Peterson's game, and we've talked about him before on the show already, and it's really funny. Since our episode with Darryn, talking about Darryn Peterson, I'm talking about, some of the things that his father has said, we detailed some things about Darryn's game that his father has simply further elaborated on. And so I think it's really interesting, given Darryn's position and kind of how he plays the game in high school, like how we perceived it on the show, and his father has kind of confirmed some different things that we have suspected about how he may translate to college. We'll get to that in a second. But first, I actually want to talk here a little bit about the actual recruitment process. So initially, according to KSR, Peterson's father had said, he will take a visit to Kentucky. He is included in this final batch of schools that Peterson is going to take a look at. And initially, we kind of thought this was going to be a little bit of a process, right? We were going to have to wait a little bit to see what Peterson ends up doing. But according to Peterson's father, who is Daryl. So there's Darryn Peterson, the 5-star, and then there's Daryl Peterson, his father. According to Daryl, it actually seems like a decision is going to be made pretty quickly here over these next couple of months as Peterson ends up going to take his visits to these different schools. Here's a quote here from Daryl Peterson. It actually seems like a decision is going to be sped up. I was more thinking, let's take our time, and it's not about rushing it. This is a huge decision, so I want to find the right fit. Now, after talking to Darryn and our family, we're trying to get these visits tackled down soon because it seems like Darryn wants to commit sooner rather than later, actually. And he talks a little bit about how, Darryn Peterson may fit in at Kentucky. Kentucky was always Darryn's dream school. He didn't know the coach at that point, and I was making the point that it doesn't matter who's in the seat. It's more about Kentucky and the tradition. Watching those guys grow up as a kid with Kentucky being so dominant, it's always been a dream school for Darryn. For him to reach back out and start putting a focus on high school guys and back on Darryn was pretty exciting. That last sentence there, obviously, in relation to Mark Pope. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to see this process for this 5-star that we've talked about recently on the show sped up, and maybe we'll end up getting to see Kentucky have a very good shot at landing Peterson at the very end of it. To hear the fact that it's his dream school, to hear the fact that he's going to take a visit, to hear the fact that this is all going to be processed rather quickly, I think it does, speak to obviously things changing, but it does speak to Mark Pope and Kentucky and their chances in this race. When you look at him as a player, though, the question of, you may ask, why is he a must-get for Mark Pope in Kentucky? It's for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think that it is for recruiting and the momentum that Kentucky is trying to build on the recruiting trail. Obviously, we've had our say here on the show about how Kentucky needs to approach roster construction in the future. And there's been a lot of debate over the past several years as to whether or not, you go and fill your roster with a bunch of 5-star freshmen and expect them to not only contribute early, but to be the make or break factor as to whether or not you have a good season or make a run in the postseason period. It feels like that type of college basketball has come and gone. It's not been as successful recently. You're seeing more experienced, more senior-laden national championship teams or teams that are in contention for national titles. You see more physical, older, experienced, mature teams step out onto the court, and those are the ones that end up making runs in March. Now, all due respect to 5-stars, that's kind of been the trend. But we've also noted on the show here, as much as Mark Pope may step away from the 5-star recruiting that we're known for here at Kentucky this season, he may step away from that this year. The expectation is for Kentucky to recruit very, very well and recruit at a very high level like they have in years past. The difference between Mark Pope's rosters and Coach Cal's rosters is that you're not relying on freshmen to make or break your season. You are adding them to a bigger puzzle, a group of what you would expect to be at this point a blend of transfers, a blend of 5-star freshmen, and then a blend of freshmen that end up staying for more than 1 year and contributing to your program. You're looking for guys that not only want to develop to go to the NBA, which I still think is going to end up being a factor for Kentucky, but you're also looking for guys that want to be here and win. And part of that is going to be, lucrative NIL deals, making things happen for the team. And if you win and you stay another year, you're able to kind of get more things financially going while you're in college. And I think that the way that Pope and his staff are going to approach roster construction for the future is very, very nice. And I think getting somebody like Peterson, first and foremost, is going to be massive for the program's momentum heading into next year's class, because you already start to see some of the different guys that you may be able to build around next season. Some of those guys being freshmen now: Travis Perry, Trent Noah, Brandon Garrison heading into what would be his junior year at that point. Otega Owe would be able to be here for a senior if he's able to stay and he doesn't enter the transfer portal or declare for the draft. You've got different pieces you can work with next season. Getting somebody like Darryn in, who is such a high-profile scorer, would really start to help things, I think, when you start to see the outlook of this program. And if you're able to get him, other 5-stars are going to look Kentucky's way more consistently. So I think that's a big aspect of it, right? There's also his actual ability. If you go and watch Peterson play at 6'5", it's interesting. The space that he's in right now, just as a player and as an offensive scorer, I think that the comp a couple of different people have for him being Devin Booker, the NBA comparison being Devin Booker, I don't think is accurate. I see this guy as Anthony Edwards, but more efficient. I think he is very good at creating shots in the mid-range. I think he's very solid as well at finishing at the rim. I think he can become more comfortable with initiating and absorbing contact if he wants to become a pure 3-level scorer. He's a little skittish at times at the rim, it seems, but sometimes he straight up dunks on people. It's weird. I don't really know what's going on there. But he doesn't. Sometimes in the highlight reels, whenever he does end up making layups and stuff, it doesn't look like he wants to create contact. It looks like he wants to put up a floater instead of go around or through somebody for a layup. But man, outside of layups, the touch this kid has on his shot is unlike anything else. Beautiful mechanics in the mid-range, high release point in both mid and outside shots. you will not find, I think, a more polished ball handler and scorer in next year's class outside of Darryn Peterson. That's better than Darryn Peterson. Insane touch shooting the basketball. And he can handle it too, which is why we said, whenever we noted Peterson's interest in Kentucky last time we talked about him, we talked about the fact that, hey, he can handle the ball and he can score. This is somebody that I think we could trust to run offensive sets, to initiate different things for Kentucky in the future. And funnily enough, it's actually something that Darren's father talked about recently. Apparently, Darryn wants to play point guard in college. This is what Daryl had to say. They see Darryn as a point guard there at Kentucky with the ball in his hands, off the screen, creating for himself and others. It's a great fit. If he's bringing that same system over, Mark Pope bringing his same system over, it's going to be an exciting year for those guys. And it's an exciting style of play that fits Darryn well. I think that Darryn also could become more of an aggressive driver. If he has the gravity that he displays in his highlight reels, where people have to step out on him and kind of contest his mid-range or outside shots, I think because of his explosiveness with the ball in his hands, he could absolutely develop a more aggressive drive to the basket game where you could just blow by people, get really good at your floater and your layup package, and just score at all three levels at will. And if it's too much for the defense to handle, they have to draw more attention to you. Oh, look, there's a 40% shooter that Kentucky has recruited that's sitting in the corner waiting for a pass. Or, oh, look, here's a 7-footer that we're going to talk about in a second that's now popped out to the perimeter that you forgot to account for whenever taking attention to Darryn Peterson. And he's open for a three, or he's open to pass the ball to somebody else because Mark Pope's bigs do that. This is a very diverse skill set that Darryn Peterson has, and it's unique at his height. And that's something that Mark Pope has excelled with. During his time at BYU. He's had taller, I guess I would say lankier guards or wings that all can shoot threes and do a little bit of everything on offense. Darryn Peterson, I think, could end up being a must-get for Kentucky basketball next season because of just how good he is at offense. That would be even more so efficient, I guess I should say, underneath somebody like Mark Pope. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Darryn Peterson taking a visit to Kentucky in just a couple of months, maybe less than a couple of months. A decision coming soon, according to his father. I think Kentucky's in a great spot right now. So let me know what you think in the comments below. All right, I want to talk here for a second about a 4-star center that is unique to Kentucky, and not only is unique to Kentucky, I think it would be another very unique prospect for Mark Pope to coach and to play. Before we dive into that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports, and I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down for a variety of different big-time sports, we get fewer and fewer games, and then the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, and all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is creating deals for all customers. They will give them a boost or a bonus daily. Every single day, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. You can head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make the most out of your summer. That is FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, continuing along here on the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Forgot what day it is for a second. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you again. I appreciate you guys checking out the show. Hey, if you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. Leave me a comment if you have a question for an upcoming episode of Locked On Kentucky. All right, so we've talked a little bit about Darryn Peterson. Let's talk about a 4-star center that Kentucky has just recently reached out to that has received a Kentucky offer, and that would be Eric, I believe it's Rybee is how you pronounce his name, R-E-I-B-E. It's not Reby, it's Rybee, if I'm not mistaken. At least that's what I've heard in interviews, so if anyone wants to correct me out there, you are more than welcome to do so. 7 foot, 235-pound center out of Potomac, Maryland. I hope that's how you pronounce that. The Bullis School in Maryland. Number 41 prospect nationally, number 4 center in the 2025 class, and the number 1 player in the state of Maryland. This is a player that was not getting a ton of love early on in his recruitment coming out of high school. Now, or coming through high school. Now, obviously, there were a bunch of different lower level schools that reached out to him. Maryland, different group of, well, it's not group of 5, it's mid-majors in college basketball have reached out to him. And now he's starting to get a little bit more attention as he starts to play on different circuits and more big-time places for bigger schools and scouts to get a look at him. Nobody had really said anything about Rybe's recruitment up until recently, but just literally today, like as I was doing research for this kid, somebody put in a crystal ball over on On3, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's also on 24/7 as well, for him to land at Creighton, which he would fit. That's a school he'd fit very, very well at. So what do we know about Eric Riebe? Well, first of all, he is originally German, and he's actually going to play for the German national team, and he's actually about to head over to Ukraine to play in the championships, according to himself. Also, according to himself, when asked to describe his game, he said, "I'm good at attacking the basket from the outside." If you go and watch his highlights, that's primarily what you're going to see out of Riebe. He is a pick and pop 3-point shooter at 7 feet tall, 235 pounds. He's a lefty as well, by the way. He is brought in, it looks like, to be a rebounder. He also mentioned that in an interview about how he believes he's a versatile big man. He's a rebounder, he's a scorer, he's a defender, but he's most valuable attacking the basket with the ball in his hands from the outside. And this is somebody that I think if you're talking about personnel for Mark Pope, if you're talking about style of play, somebody that you would plug in and would be not just a rotational piece, but a very lethal one at that, at 7 feet tall. We've seen guys like Noah Waterman, Ali Khalifa play forward and center for the Cougars and be very aggressive, shooting shots from beyond the arc. Somebody like Riebe, who is, again, a lankier forward type of player that Mark Pope has had in the past that can go and knock down an outside shot with consistency, he would be extremely dangerous in Pope's offense, especially if he was able to run with the system as far as tempo goes that Pope wants to have. And he said as much recently that stuff like what Pope likes to do excites him. He said, "Things are very good with Kentucky right now. I like Coach Pope, and I like how he contacts me. He calls me like every single day, and with him being a big man, he knows how I feel and how I think on and off the court. I think he could be a good mentor for me. They see me as a shooter in their system. They like how I run the floor and that I can take early threes and play inside out, handoffs, and making the passes." So that's something else I wanted to note here about Eric Riebe. It's not just about the three-point shooting, right? Whenever you get somebody tall like this and you get him in a system like this where you're shooting over 30 threes a game, you want to essentially highlight the threes, and that's kind of it. But also, I want to pay attention to what Pope has also done with centers in the past or forwards in the past, even if they have not been excellent in other areas of their game. He makes them into passers. He makes them into better rebounders. He makes them into better defenders. But the passing is really where you start to see different big men shine, especially in the system, that they can prove or improve on that area of their game, or at least prove that they've got it and it's a strength. Somebody like Khalifa, right? Traore from a season ago, who played for BYU, who was really, really good in the post, but also was solid when it came to handoffs, passes, backdoor stuff. Amari Williams, I think, is going to be very, very good at that this season. And he is not a three-point shooter, but is an imposing defender, a very physical, big defender at the rim. Somebody like Riebe could step in and not just be a threat to take an outside shot on a pick and pop or pick and roll type of, or different type of situation where you run a set where he kind of flares out or something like that. But he's also a threat for backdoor stuff if you bring too much attention, if he's coming out to the line and you're trying to make sure that he's not able to get a shot off. You're 7 foot tall, throw a pass over somebody, and you're looking for a layup or a cut to the basket. It's easy offense, right? So many different teams paid too much attention to BYU's outside shooting last year. We can actually pull this up on KenPom right now. If you go and look, BYU was 8th in the nation in 2-point field goal percentage, 57.5%. They were only 137th in 3-point percentage at 34.8%, but they were still one of the nation's most efficient offenses. They didn't turn the ball over. They grabbed offensive rebounds, and they struggled to get to the foul line at times. But outside of that, every aspect of their offense was really, really fun and efficient. And they played with an insane amount of tempo, and they distributed the ball very, very well. Somebody like Rybee, who's a top 50 prospect, may end up at Creighton. Who knows? I think it's way too early to put in a crystal ball, especially considering what I'm about to tell you. Somebody like Rybee would fit perfectly. And then develop, I think, into a center or a forward that you see, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, that you see on a national championship contending team. You've seen UConn over the past couple of years do one of two things. Either bring in experienced transfers at the forward position that can shoot threes, or they have taken a homegrown kid, a prospect from the high school ranks, and they've brought them up, and they have put them in the spotlight when their senior guy steps out, and they have thrived. It's been pretty consistent for a few years now. That's how Dan Hurley and UConn have done it. Somebody like Rybee could absolutely be in the program for a couple of years and really shine sophomore or junior year on a team that makes a legitimate run. These are the pieces that you have to look at. These are the types of pieces that you have to look at. He said in a recent interview, I'm going over to the German national team now in Ukraine for the championships. So I'll probably go for my visits after that towards the end of August, but I do want to make a decision before my school year starts. So this is 2 different players right now that Kentucky is in pursuit of that are going to be making their decisions relatively soon. So I'm excited about it. I'm very excited about what we could be doing here with Peterson, with Rybee, with guys like Jasper Johnson, who I think Kentucky has a great chance with right now. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you like Rybee? Do you like Peterson? How do you feel about the Cats moving forward? All that good stuff. All right, I want to wrap up the show here talking about a preseason top 25. And I'm about to go on a little bit of a rant, so just bear with me. ESPN, Jeff Borzello, ESPN staff writer, put out way too early top 25 rankings earlier today, July 1st. And Kentucky's cracked the top 25. They're at number 23, according to Borzello. And I want to go into what he has to say about Kentucky in a second, but I want to look at this top 25 as a whole. I'm like sometimes I feel the need to, as Kentucky fans, we need to be educated on what's going on with all things college basketball. I think it's very important that if you're going to talk ball, you better know ball outside of just your team. Kansas is number 1 in the preseason rankings here at ESPN. Who, raise your hand if you're excited for another year of Hunter Dickinson in college. I'm certainly not. But the Jayhawks are going to be very, very good, and they've brought in a couple of different big-time transfers at shooting guard and small forward that are going to be scores for the Jayhawks. Zeke Mayo out of South Dakota State averaged 18.8 points per game, big-time scorer there. And then A.J. Storr, who averaged 16.8 points per game at Wisconsin a season ago. Pair that with K.J. Adams, who averaged almost 13. D.J. Harris, who averaged 8.5 and killed Kentucky with 3-pointers a season ago because Kentucky wouldn't step out and guard him. What'd you think, or who would have thought, rather, playing defense on a 40% shooter would be a smart idea. Anyway, Hunter Dickinson at 18 points per game. This team's going to score. He is absolutely going to score. Also, Rylan Griffin from Alabama is here, a taller guard there. Shaquille Moore, a transfer from Mississippi State, who's also going to be very solid as well, a senior guard from the Bulldogs. This is a very good, deep team. At number 2, they have Alabama, who is also going to be very, very good. Mark Sears is back. Grant Nelson, as much as we don't like him, he's back. Chris Youngblood, who averaged over 15 a game at South Florida, he's transferring in. Latrell Wrightsell Jr. is going to get his shot at shooting guard. Cliff Amori, who Kentucky wanted in the transfer portal for a brief moment, he's going to be there with Bama. UConn's number 3, they have to reload at a couple of different spots, but they got Aiden Mahaney alongside a couple of different really big-time recruits, Liam McNeely, most notably. Houston at number 4. All of this is fine. Gonzaga at 5. I think that this preseason ranking is actually okay, despite a step back a season ago for the Bulldogs. They're actually going to be pretty good this year. They brought in a couple of big-time transfers. Ryan Nimhard's back. Nolan Hickman's back. Graham, I believe it's EK, not Ike, from the transfer from Wyoming. He was big for them a season ago. Ben Gregg was really good at the end of the season for the Bulldogs. They're going to be good. Baylor's going to be insane with Jeremy Roach, Jaden Nunn, VJ Edgecombe, Langston Love, Norchad O'Meara. This is a very good team. I'd probably have them ranked a little higher. If it were just me, I'd have them ranked over Houston, but that's just me. That's going to be a very, very, very good team out in Waco. Iowa State at number 7, as they should be, and metrics love this team right now. Duke at number 8, Arizona at number 9, North Carolina at number 10. Top 10, I think, is fine. Auburn at number 11, I think you could put them inside the top 10 if you wanted to. A couple of different metrics actually, or a couple of different preseason rankings actually have them at like 3 or 4, which is insane. After Auburn, I get into the what are they doing here stretch of the top 25. And you could make it, not you individually, you could, just a generic person putting this together or ranking them here, could make the argument for some of these teams, but I personally, I don't see it. And it starts at number 12 with Texas A&M. Why is Texas A&M ranked 12th? 12th in ESPN's preseason top 25. They were ranked 5th in the AP poll to start last year. And they finished 21-15, guys. They finished the regular season 18-13. They weren't going to make the tournament if they didn't beat Kentucky in the NCAA tournament. If they also didn't beat, if I'm not mistaken, Ole Miss. Just why? It's one of the statistically the most inefficient teams when it came to shooting the basketball season ago. They shot 29% from 3, 46% from inside the arc. They had an effective field goal percentage of 45.7, which was 341st nationally. There are maybe 50 schools, I guarantee, you've never even heard of that were better at shooting the basketball than Texas A&M a season ago. And most of the guys are back. Wade Taylor, Manny Obasaki, Henry Coleman. There's a bunch of different guys here that are returning that couldn't shoot worth a lick a season ago. They're not gonna be good. There's literally no reason to believe that the Texas A&M Aggies are going to be a significantly better basketball team than they were a season ago. You cannot tell me that these guys who have not shot well for 3 seasons plus are going to just magically put it together. And I understand the rebounding. I understand they're so good at grabbing second chance points. That's not going to save them from being a 20-ish win team. This is not a top 15 team. This is not a top 15 team. Tennessee at number 13 is sort of fine. Chaz Lanier, Sakai Ziegler, Jemai Meshack. I don't know if I trust him at small forward. I don't know if I'd put him there. They've got a couple of different new transfers in for their front court. One of them is, his first name is Darlin Stone Dubar, which is just a sick name, by the way, from Hofstra. Will they be able to compete physically, I think, with some of the bigger teams in the conference? I don't know. I'd have them around this point, but if it's me, I'm putting them lower just because of bias. Arkansas at number 14 is ridiculous, in my opinion. We don't even have to get into it, but it's the same thing that you've seen, frankly, at Kentucky at times over the last few seasons where, they brought in a bunch of 5-star guys, and, they brought in this one transfer that is supposed to be really good. Guys, this team doesn't have a single good shooter on their roster. And you can make the argument that Boogie Fland is going to be whatever. I can't get over the fact that during EYBL circuits, he shot 30-ish% from 3. They don't have a consistent shooter. on their roster, at least not right now. That's not a top 15 team in my mind. Creighton is better. Creighton's got Stephen Ashworth. They've got Ryan Kalkbrenner back. Both those guys are really good. Pop Isaacs, who averaged almost 16 a game at Texas Tech. Creighton's better. Purdue, who made the national championship a season ago, I think is probably better than a team like Arkansas and definitely a team like Texas A&M right now. You could not tell me with a straight face that if the Purdue Boilermakers or the Creighton Blue Jays faced off against Texas A&M, that Texas A&M would be even close to, let me rephrase, the opposing team would be favored. And I think it would be somewhere between 5 to 10 points. It's just, it's not, I don't understand this. Marquette, I think it's going to be good. Cam Jones is back. There's some guys that are going to have to really step it up around him, but I think they're going to be good. Indiana has done crazy work in the transfer portal at number 18. They, I think, are going to be fun. Cincinnati at 19, I don't understand completely. They signed a couple of big-time prospects, but overall, I just don't know if they're going to be able to like make that big jump, but okay. Ole Miss is better than Texas A&M and probably Arkansas. Florida at 21, definitely better than Texas A&M and Arkansas. Texas at number 22, better than Arkansas, better than Texas A&M. I don't understand this. Kentucky at 23, if you look them down the board, they project to, according to ESPN, they project to start 5 guys that all averaged double figures last year. It's going to be a well-rounded, deep team. Of course, Kirk Reese is not starting at point guard. Jeff, you might want to do a little bit more research there, buddy. But it's a well-rounded team at 23 with Kentucky. I think they could be a little higher if you wanted to put them there. UCLA, I think, is going to be good, and they deserve to be in the top 25. Rutgers, I don't understand why, if with a team like Arkansas, like, oh, they brought in all these top players and they've got all these different guys that are going to be really good because they had a high star rating coming out of high school. Why is Rutgers not rated higher then? Because they got the number 2 and number 3 player in last year's class. Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper. Those 2 guys are going to play. They're going to play a ton. They're going to be good. They also got 3 transfers, one of which averaged over 17 a game. Why is this team not ranked higher? It's bias. I'll tell you that. It's bias. I don't understand it. Kentucky could be ranked a little higher. That middle tier of the top 25, I think you could definitely scramble them around, either leave some of them completely unranked, looking at you Aggies, or lift some guys in the bottom half, or bottom third, I guess I should say, of the top 25, up to that 15-ish range. This is, I don't know. It's a preseason poll, but the expectations for some of these teams heading into the season, I think, are either there's not a lot to base them on, or it's just pure either recency bias, media bias, whatever you want to call it. These analysts are getting excited about the wrong teams. And I understand part of their job is to kind of drum stuff up before the season starts. And obviously, we like to talk about things that get us excited here at Locked On Kentucky. But at least we try and be objective about how we project things out, right? There are multiple teams in that top 25 that either don't deserve to be there or should be ranked significantly lower or significantly higher. And this is coming from the global, worldwide leader in sports, apparently. I don't know. I think that it's a poor job, especially whenever you realize that, hey, Kentucky's not starting Kirk Reese at point guard. They're going to start Lamont Butler. Did you pay attention? Do you do any amount of research? Because if you just wanted to Google Lamont Butler, if you wanted to Google Kirk Carissa, first of all, probably going to see an episode from us talking about the point guard position, but you're definitely going to see articles where Butler has just recently, like within the last week, talked about the fact that he's going to be the guy at PG. People who have jobs at these big-time companies, I won't say that. These big-time companies need to do a better job of doing research. Because they don't, clearly. If they did, they would have figured that out with the rotation with Kentucky, and they definitely figure out that, hey, maybe Texas A&M's not a top 15 team. I don't know. Maybe I'm ragging on the Aggies too hard. They could win the title. They could win the national championship, but stuff like this just doesn't make sense, guys. Like, Come on. Anyway, how do you feel about Kentucky at 23, by the way? I think you could put them a little higher. I'm happy that they're in the top 25 personally at all, especially considering Mark Pope had to put this roster together within like a month and a week, 5 weeks-ish. It's a good team. It's a good team. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram, that's at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.